Hi everybody, welcome to those supply chain lectures. I am Johannes Vermorel and today I will be presenting the foundations of supply chain. So for those of you who are watching the lecture live, you can ask the question via the chat at any point of time. I will not be reading the chat during the lecture. However, at the very end of the lecture, I will go back to the chat, read the question, and try to answer them to the best I can. Let's proceed then. So let's start with an observational definition. 40 years ago, my two parents were starting their respective careers at Procter & Gamble. And there was a saying at the time. There was a saying that smart people go to marketing. And obviously, my two parents were from marketing. That dynamic people go to sales, that reliable people go to production, and that people lacking all those qualities were ending up in supply chain. Or rather, at the time, they were saying that they were ending up in logistics. I've just modernized the quote. And hopefully not. We really want to do better, to be better. And that will be the point of those lectures. But first, I believe that there is a grain of truth in this quote. And the interesting thing is I believe that supply chain did not manage during the 20th century to attract, I would say, as many brilliant minds as it could have. And if we are looking at the 21st century, you could say, well, supply chain is still niche, and that's the reason why we can't attract, as many brilliant people as other domains. But if I look at other niche areas, let's say online advertising, for example, a fairly niche thing, I would say those people tend to attract, more than their fair share of brilliant minds, and they have already succeeded doing so in the 21st century. So now the question is, and I believe that we need, a better form, a superior form of supply chain to attract those people, and obviously to unlock, I would say, a superior form of profits as well. So let's start with an actual definition of interest of the supply chain. So I would say that supply chain is the mastery of optionality in presence of variability when managing the flow of physical goods. So what do I mean by that? By optionality, I mean all the things that you can do or not do, and on a daily basis. So that would be, for example, every single time you have a SKU anywhere, you can decide to bring more material to this SKU. You can decide to move the inventory that you have from a location to another location. You can decide to move your price up and down. You can decide of the assortment that you have in the store. You can decide to reshuffle what you have on the shelves in the store, etc., etc. So you have, I would say, a very large number of options that are available to you. And I believe that's a bit the essence of supply chain, is mastering all those options, nurturing them also. And then you have variability. You have tons of things that are way beyond your control. You do not control market demand. You can, to some extent, forecast it, yes. But you have no, I would say, definitive control on many forces that matter. Demand is one of them. Lead times, you have certain control of the lead time, but it's not absolute. And same things, for example, for the prices. You can control your own prices, but you don't control the prices of your competitors. So there is tons of things that varies, which make that supply chain is not just about orchestration, looking at things that are, I would say, laid down in a very clean and precise manner. And then obviously, it's a flow of physical things. So we have all the physical constraints that apply. We can't just 3D print and then teleport goods. Not yet, actually. So we need to accommodate all those constraints. And that's basically the supply chain is a mastery of all of that for the greater good of the companies that are being served and their clients, obviously. So now, what do we want from those lectures? I mean, my goal is to basically achieve, I would say, a better form, a superior form of supply chain that deliver a superior form of supply chain performance. That's a bit tautological. We will have a look at what do I mean by that. I am a big believer in quantitative method and in a financial perspective. But that's just a belief, it's not, there is nothing scientific about it. So I will try to, uncover certain methodology to achieve that, and I will precise the goals, and I believe that there is a lot of nuance and subtleties as far, what does better mean precisely. We will have, through those lectures, we'll cover those things. Those lectures are intended for a fairly, I would say, large set of audiences. And by the way, those audiences are a bit in conflict, and I believe that one of my goals through those series of lectures will be to put maybe some of the audiences out of their comfort zone. So on one side, we have the upper management side, supply chain executives. I believe that for many companies who are operating large supply chain, the big challenge is what can they do to do more, considering all the modern computing, all the things that modern computing hardware and modern, I would say, software can offer for their company and their clients. And here there is a big challenge to basically to move away from, I would say, the pure aspect of leadership to more to aspects that are a bit more technical. But it's very important to have, I would say, technical depth in those matters. Otherwise, you're kind of blind to what you can do, and it's very hard to guide, manage, coach, mentor people if they are doing things that you don't really comprehend. Even if your intent, you won't have the time to become like an absolute technical specialist. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I would say I have the IT specialist or the data scientist who would basically be maybe screaming on the chat, show me the code, show me the formulas. And to them, I would say my message would be, hold on. You have powerful tools at your disposal, but do you know how to wield them? And I don't mean technically, I mean business-wise. Are you confident that what you're doing is really in the interest of your company or the companies that happen to be paying you if you're a contractor or something? And here, my humble experience is that because I started not on the path of a supply chain executive, but on the path of a data scientist, my experience is that you can do, I would say, there is a lot of ways to be misguided when approaching supply chain. So I would say hold on, and the ambition of those lectures will be to give you some depth in terms of business vision, some street smart intelligence so that you can do better for the supply chain. So let's clarify a bit the scope and non-scope that we have for supply chain. So in terms of scope, I believe that I will be including things that the very classical things, planning, forecasting, scheduling, all of that are pretty much, I would say, the usual definition of supply chain. But I will be also including, from my own perspective of supply chain, that pricing, assortment, merchandising, all of those things are part of supply chain from my perspective. Again, if we look at supply chain, which is all the options that you have to serve the markets, literally pricing is obviously one of them, and I believe that it doesn't even really make sense to forecast the demand if you don't know what your future prices will be, because obviously if you can vastly lower the price, you will vastly inflate the demand, and it's just very mechanical. So basically you cannot treat demand forecasting as if it was something that is independent from your pricing strategy. It's obviously completely entangled. And same things about merchandising. Obviously the demand that you will see in a store depends on what you put on the shelves. It's relatively obvious that if you keep your goods in the warehouse and you don't even put them in front of customers, you sell less. Again, the idea that you can keep those two things apart, I believe, is part insanity. So all of that, and obviously, the purchasing matters. So all those options, through the company, for me, are part of the supply chain. But what is not part of the supply chain, from my perspective, and that would be the perspective adopted through those lectures, is things like logistics, for example. I mean, again, I'm not denying, and it's not a judgment, by the way. I'm not denying that, let's say, managing truck drivers is exceedingly difficult. I mean, it is very, very difficult. And it's actually essential for many supply chain to operate. You need to accommodate people that are working in the field. Those jobs are very tough. You need to keep the morale. you need to lead those people. You have to make sure that they don't, suffer from hazards, accidents. It's actually quite difficult in practice, especially when people are tired, dealing with machinery, dealing with heavy equipment and all sorts of things. But I will be, excluding those concerns. They are important concerns, but they are not the concerns of those lectures. So I'm focusing on, again, the optionality, the mastery of optionality, the things that where you can take, tons of mundane decisions every single day to basically nudge things and basically improve, the experience, the service to the client from many directions. And obviously, I will not be doing things like team building, self-improvement, and whatnot. Again, my perspective is more quantitative on this, on all those sort of matters. Now, a small disclaimer. I do have, more than my fair share of conflict of interest. I am the CEO of a software company that happens to be selling supply chain software intended for the predictive optimization of supply chains. So obviously, I am not exactly neutral in this game. Nevertheless, I believe that my perspective has some value, especially considering the way Lokad is approaching those supply chains. So Lokad has been created in 2008, and at the time I started as forecasting as a service, but I rapidly, like 4 years later, it was more like predictive supply chain optimization as a service kind of company. And where our experience is, I believe, relatively unique is that nowadays we are literally operating about 100 supply chains on behalf of our clients. And when I say operating the supply chains, I don't mean that we provide a software where our clients call all the shots and do everything through, menus and buttons and everything. I mean, Lokad delivers a service where typically we provide, optimized endgame decisions. And when I say endgame decisions, it's literally what should be the price today for this article, how many units should you move from this distribution center to this store, how many units should you actually manufacture today in this plant, how many units should you order from one of your overseas suppliers today, etc. So literally, and again, Lokad, we directly go to the endgame decisions. Obviously, our clients, they don't write checks in blanks to Lokad, so it's a suggestion that we are making. Our clients still have the opportunity to basically, veto what we suggest. But nonetheless, my casual observation is that for a large majority of our clients, we are basically hitting something that would be, a 99% hit rate of we suggest things and they are rolled out in production just as such, no manual override. It's literally, just a stamp of approval, and this is it. And we even have quite a few clients where it's actually automated, where it's the decisions are flowing to the ERP directly. And that's very interesting because I believe that this experience give us a pretty unique perspective when it comes to what does it actually mean to optimize a supply chain in the real world. So it's not an experience like a software vendor that sells licenses and then say, well, thank you very much, you're now the proud owner of one of the license of my product where you're printing your own money through your software licenses. Now we are, I would say, directly in position of skin in the game. We have to do good. And by the way, the vast majority of the clients of Lokad go for a monthly subscription where our clients can basically quit on us and there is no implementation fee at any point of time. So that gave us, I would say, a certain DNA of I would say, survival instincts of how do you actually succeed in supply chain in delivering actual value, because you know what, your clients can quit on us at any given point of time. And you have to do good and not just, do a one-shot operation of selling an expensive license and move on. Which brings me to how did we achieve that? And here I would like to have a look at what is typically referred to as the mainstream supply chain theory. I mean, most people would just say the supply chain theory. I'm referring to this theory as the mainstream theory as opposed to the quantitative supply chain perspective of Lokad. So those two books, which are basically Inventory Management and Production Planning from Silver, Pyke, Peterson, and The Fundamentals of Supply Chain Theory, Snyder and Shen. By the way, I will be including the reference of those two books in the description of the video later on if you're interested. I believe those two books to be the gold standard of the mainstream supply chain theory. So literally, those are very extensive compilations of the last 60 years or so of supply chain research, which goes by various names, operation research, forecasting, business optimization, and so on. And those books, as far in terms of academic works, they are just very, very good. They are well written. They have a very clear presentation. They are to the point. They are quite thick. Each one of those is about 800 pages long. Each one of those books is basically quoting something like 1,000 papers or so. So you have like a massive bibliography at the end. They have exercise. They have plenty of things. They are very coherent, very well written, and I believe what they present is fundamentally correct from, let's say, a mathematical point of view. And furthermore, I would say those two books, they are also very accurate depiction of research that took place over the last, 4, 5, 6 decades in those fields. So that's why I qualify them as being the mainstream supply chain theory. Now, are those really satisfying? I would say no. And I would say disappointingly so. And when I founded Lokad, I already had at the time the first of those two books in my hands. And I've been trying to apply, this mainstream supply chain theory with my clients for years. And literally, I had the chance, I believe, over the 1 decade plus of experience that I had at Lokad to discuss with literally probably close to, 200 or 300 supply chain directors. And I've never seen any company where it was working, not a single one. Sometimes the situation can be a bit confused because some of the terms that are employed, in the mainstream supply chain theory happen to be used by companies, such as, let's say, for example, safety stocks. Yes, and companies are using safety stocks, but when you have a close look at the way safety stocks are implemented in companies, usually it comes with plenty of twists, numerical, oddities that have absolutely nothing to do with what the theory is saying we should do. And yet, the many companies that I've met, they were absolutely correct to bring all those sort of twists. And usually the situation is as follows. The supply chains, they are in large companies, there are already people that are aware of this theory. I don't think that the counter-argument is that, this theory did not succeed because there is too much ignorance going around. No. I had met, many supply chain directors that were very familiar with this theory. I mean, obviously, they don't know the hundreds of formulas by heart, but they know they exist. And even if the supply chain director doesn't happen to know precisely those formulas, they have somebody in the team that knows them. They have a consultant that knows them. I mean, this knowledge is really mainstream. It has been taught at universities for decades. So ignorance is not the explanation. And typically, even at the software level, what is very interesting that the mainstream theory is very present in the mainstream ERP implementations. They propose textbook implementations of the supply chain theory. And what is very intriguing is that what I've seen over and over and over is that you have the mainstream supply chain theory that is very cleanly and properly implemented into some kind of ERP, and it's just not working. And what are people doing? They fall back on their Excel spreadsheets, and they feel bad about it. They feel as if, there is like the truth, the scientific truth, but we are not quite there yet. So we have to do some kind of data, dirty data munging on our spreadsheets. But it's a bit an accident, at some point in the future, we will manage to use, the features provided by the ERP. But the thing is that this story has been going on, has been unfolding for 3 decades now. And my counter proposition to you is that it's just not working. It's literally not working. And what people are doing with their spreadsheets, there is an essence of truth there. And actually, and that's where we should be looking at. This is not, so the problem that I have with this mainstream supply chain theory is that literally it's not working. And at a philosophical level, I have one more problem, is that those books are written in such a way that they cannot be contradicted by the real world. For those of you who have maybe read a bit of epistemology, you might recognize, the Karl Popper argument of falsifiability. I will be getting back to that later in the lectures. But the thing is, if science is really about a scientific theory needs to take risk with regard of the reality. So if you cannot do science if what you say cannot be challenged by the real world. And my problem with those 2 books is that literally they are immune to the real world. They cannot be challenged because what they're saying is perfectly true, is perfectly consistent, but it's like small tidbits of math that have their internal consistency. But that's the problem. They are immune to the reality, and here lie the crux of what is, I think, deeply wrong with the supply chain theory, or at least one of the aspects. Now, to make things even more confused, let's have a look at a bit of jargon with regards to supply chain. So I will, in this series of lecture, I will distinguish between what I refer to as the management versus the optimization. All of that being under the umbrella of control. So if we say, supply chain control, I mean 2 very, very different things. On one side, we have the supply chain management. And by the way, when I say management, it has nothing to do with manager or like an executive, like a supply chain director. No. I'm just saying more like the accountant perspective. You just manage the records. So that would be supply chain management. So it boils down to all the things where you just want to, manage the information, to process it, to just do the mundane data entry and the mundane workflows. So by the way, this is management as in customer relationship management. So your CRM, your CRM tool, it doesn't do anything with your clients. It just records, the name of your clients and what are the hot leads and whatnot. That is, management. By the way, some people in some, I would say, misguided market analysts during the 90s coined the term of ERP. And I believe that the term was very, very misguided. ERPs have nothing to do with planning, none at all, despite the name. So ERP should actually be, would be much better name, enterprise resource management. You just want to keep track of all the assets owned by the company. So that's I would say the management side, and obviously we have supply chain management, which is really here. I'm really referring to all the things about keeping track of the items, keeping track of the order, keeping track of the process, keeping track of who can do this or that, etc., etc. And then on the other side we have the optimization, which is where the real intelligence lies. And here we have a few things in this area. We have things that would be the APS, Advanced Planning System, but it's not. I put those question marks because it's not completely satisfying. I mean, the problem with the forecasting and planning perspective is that it's not taking ownership of the end-game financial performance of the supply chain. Again, for those of you who have been watching, my Lokad TV episode, that's those percents of error instead of being, dollars of rewards and errors. That's what I'm talking about. So that would be, what would be on the other side, and that would be if we want to think in terms of tech, virtual assistant. In terms of tech, maybe spreadsheets. Obviously, this is not a super smart piece of software, but it's more, aligned with this vision of we have the management, which is just, the reflection of the electronic counterpart of what is happening in the real world. And then we have the optimization, which is leveraging all this optionality that we have, all those decisions that we have to take. This is where the optimization for. And by the way, in those series of lectures, I'm definitely adopting the perspective of the supply chain optimization. That's, we are not there to, figure out how we are going to write the next WMS, the next warehouse management system. This is not the point of those lectures. It's definitively about how do we, optimize our supply chain and make them better. Now, let's have a close look about the supply chain problem. So the supply chain problem, what is the nature of this challenge? And here we have a very subtle but profound distinction to make. Is it a tame problem or is it a wicked problem? And I would say most practitioners and most data scientists are not even aware of this duality. So a tame problem is something like chess. You have well-established rules. It can be very complex, but the rules are very clear. And so you have a problem that is perfectly specified, which means that once you have such a problem, it's just a matter of pure engineering to crack it. It can be very difficult. It took literally decades of efforts for computer scientists to figure out a way to have a computer outperforming, worldwide champions. There were hardware innovations and there were software innovations. So it can be very difficult, but I would say since the beginning of the 20th century and that people started to explore the idea of universal compute machines, there was like no doubt. I mean, there was zero doubt in the scientific community that a game like chess would essentially one day be solved through, pure, I would say, compute methods. I mean, maybe not zero doubt, but very low doubts. Again, that's a very well-specified problem. It's like computing, a bazillion digits for pi. It is a difficult engineering problem, but it's a problem where you know that you can succeed. I mean, obviously, there are limits due to the fact that at some point, you don't have enough memory, storage, compute, and everything. But it's a very framed problem. And same things about, if we go back to supply chain, time series forecasting. Time series forecasting is a very, well-established problem, but and that's the big but. Does it even, reflect what is happening in a real supply chain? And my proposition for you is absolutely not. And I know that if we go back to those books about the mainstream supply chain theory, that time series forecasting would be featuring prominently across many chapters. And what I'm telling you is that it's not even the right way to look at the problem. We have to consider that in supply chain, the problems are wicked. So what do I mean by wicked? I mean, supply chains are complex and they include, people. Yeah, people, process, machines, hardware, a lot of stuff, but mostly, first and foremost, it includes lots of people. And interestingly, as soon as you have people involved, the problems get very rapidly very different. And let's have a look, for example, at investing. So imagine you want to invest money. So you have a large inheritance, and you want to make an investment. And you can seek financial advice, but it's difficult because let's have a look at the incentive of the market when you're seeking, financial advice. If you're giving financial advice, what is your incentive? You obviously, if you want to do an investment, you want to have the best financial advice. But if you're in a position to give financial advice, what is your incentive? I mean, your incentive is literally to scream to the entire world that you should buy this because I really believe in this value. And while the entire world converged to buy the stock that you're actually promoting, when you think that you've actually raised the value of the stock by quite a bit, you just discreetly sell your stock, and then obviously let people incur a loss because they are bought high and sell low. And by the way, the very mechanism that I have just described is known as pump and dump. And literally, when you look at financial advice, you will see that it's very, very difficult because pretty much everybody that has a reputation has a massive incentive to do pump and dumps. And it's very, very difficult, you know. So you have adversarial incentives. But let's have a look at another things, you know. Recall my parents were from 40 years ago. They were on marketing at Procter & Gamble. What is a good ad? You're running, you know, an FMCG company. What is a good ad? Well, there is no clear answer to this question because imagine that you can prove that this is the best ad. Well, okay, so you have the best ad, and then the entire competition decide that they agree this is the best ad. So they actually do copies that are completely similar to your own, you know, advertising message, and thus you are pushing to the market one message that has been, you know, endlessly copied by your competitor. Is it the best? Still, no, because it has become completely undifferentiated from the competition. So you see, wicked problems, they don't have good solutions. There is no optimality going on. And because even if you think that you have something that is, you know, very, very good, you can be copied. And then due to the fact that competitors can respond to your very moves, they can undo whatever optimization, you know, or optimality you think you had. So that's very interesting because you see, suddenly you can see that the essence of the game being played, it's a game where it's dynamic, where your opponents are actually smart. They can respond to what you're doing. So in this sort of concept, and if we go back, you know, to the mainstream theory, I would say one of my big criticism is that they take supply chain entirely from the tame problem angle. And so the idea that you can have tons of adversarial behaviors is completely absent. And I believe that it's completely unrealistic. Because if we look at supply chain optimization, if we pay attention, you will see that you have adversarial behaviors at every single level. And that should be absolutely key. If you want to be able to achieve any degree of you know, supply chain optimization, you have to be, you know, resilient to all those problems. So what are the problems? I mean, first, it's an illusion to think that I would say, let's say that the interest of employees is necessarily aligned with the interest of the company. Yes, usually there is a fair, you know, it's fairly in agreement. There can be some, I would say this alignment can be, you know, strengthened, but, you know, by design, you know, by the very fact that you're an employee in one company, especially when you look at, I believe nowadays, I think before the age of 30 in France, so people who have like an engineering degree in France before the age that are less than 30, their average duration of employment is 1 year, 1.5 years, and then they change company. So obviously, you know, when you have people that change of company in less than 2 years on average, you cannot expect that those people will have like an infiable, you know, loyalty to the company. I mean, they want to do good, yeah, no question. But you can't just assess that as an axiom that they will have like absolute loyalty to the other company. And then what about the software vendors? Well, if we look at software vendors, by the way, Lokad, one of them, is that they have their own financial interest in mind. And when you look at how, I would say, large ERP vendors have behaved over the last couple of decades, you would see that they have actually increased year after year their maintenance fees by quite a large amount. So there is really the question, and the more problems it creates in terms of production, the more need there is for maintenance. So it's not exactly, again, aligned with the best interest of the company. And let's have a look at the consultants and the IT companies. Well, same thing. If you're a consultant and you identify a problem, then your best interest is to make the most of this problem by milking the case and making sure that you can, you know, bill hundreds of days of man days on this mission. So again, I'm saying, you know, I'm defending the devil here. I'm playing the devil advocate here. But I just want you to consider the fact that we have a wicked problem on our hand. And even, if we are looking from a purely cooperative perspective, the fact that you can, undercut your competitors. For example, you can decide I'm going to pass bigger order, and then I'm going to shrink my assortment so I can have a much lower per unit price, so I can undercut my competitors. It can completely disrupt the supply chain of my competitors. So you see, supply chain is not necessarily a game that is intended to be it's intended to be played, I would say, nicely. If we look at companies that have been exceedingly successful, let's say Amazon, they're relatively ruthless. And I'm not saying that it's necessarily a core value to be imitated, but clearly it's something that you cannot ignore. You may have different values, yes, but you cannot pretend that the problem is a tame problem where competitors don't matter, where everybody plays nice and gentle, and where the problems are completely well specified, and that there is nobody who is going to literally find a way to cheat. And I'm not cheating in the sense of doing illegal things, of just doing some things that you didn't think of it, and they are literally doing something and undercutting you through a tangent, being smart about it. So now the question is that does a supply theory even make sense from a perspective? I believe it does. The thing is, but first you have to consider that, and pardon me an analogy. Analogies are very weak forms of reasoning. But if I was saying about, I would say, a medical science that would only apply to idealized patients, that would make no sense. When a patient is trying to see, his doctor to get a treatment, usually the patient is not somebody who is young and in perfect health conditions. It's people that are of a certain age, that can have plenty of other problems. They can be overweight. They can have preconditions, tons of them. I mean, the modern medicine is not to deal about idealized patients that are, almost perfect in every regards, minus the pathology of interest. It's to deal with real patients with tons of problems. And I believe that supply chain should be a bit like that. You need to deal with real companies that have tons of problems in addition to the problem of interest. And you need to have a theory that can cope with the real. And then another thing is, why do you need a theory? Is that actually you cannot do without a theory. The theory is literally the way you look at the problem, the perspectives that you have, the way you frame, anything that you do in this field of study and in this practice. So it's an illusion. I mean, worst case, you can have a very bad theory or an unspoken theory about this, but there is still a theory. So as long as we have like a better form of a theory, we are good. And that's what I will be trying to do in those lectures. Now, I believe that there will be a method behind the madness. So this is a pretty vast undertaking, and for those of you who have read a bit, the plan that is given on the lokad.com page about the lectures, you can see that there is almost 100 sessions ahead. I'm sorry, I wish I could, make it very short, but I'm afraid we are tackling very tough problems that do not suffer simplistic solutions. So first thing will be we need to expand our horizon. Another criticism that I would do to the mainstream supply chain theory is that it's only looking inward. And I think it's profoundly wrong. I mean, supply chains do not operate in a vacuum. There is a world out there, and you need to have, I would say, some level of deep understanding to really do something good for your supply chain. What do I mean by that? I mean, there are tons of things where there are tons of things to be learned from. We will see in the series of lectures that epistemology we can learn a lot from that, even from actual medical science. But in a more practical perspective, there will be obviously computer science and machine learning and all sorts of numerical recipes. I think especially the data science part of the audience is probably very familiar that there is more to supply chain than the strict than just the traditional recipes. But my message for the data scientists that are part of the audience is beware. The books that are there, the books, especially the recent one, the Fundamentals of Supply Chain Theory, the authors are perfectly well aware of modern machine learning techniques. They even have a chapter on support vector machines. So the problem do not lie in the lack of access to modern machine learning techniques. The authors are well aware of the rapid progress that took place in this domain. This is not the problem. This is absolutely not the problem. So you need to have, I would say, a much broader view on the vast, on a large variety of fields. Economics also, that will be, and I mean, you will see, we have about 15 sessions on very diverse subjects, so we need to cover. I believe that those subjects are a bit essential to have like a high-level perspective that happen to be at least approximately valid instead of being exactly wrong on the problem. Then we have a methodological problem that goes very, very deep. How do we, one of the premise of I would say, of many sciences, and I'm using the term plural because there are many sciences, is reproducibility. So, for example, in physics, you can set up an experiment, do the experiments, look at what, let's say, what the Maxwell equations are telling you about, an electromagnetic field, and then carry on the experiments and make sure that the experiment is, confirm what the theory is saying. And you can replicate this experiment at will, and that's very, very powerful. That will be the hard sciences. And then you can have, more soft sciences. Let's say, for example, medical sciences. Medical sciences, it's already much more complicated, but there is, there is large number of patients. That's how you can establish that, for example, you have a positive, trade-off for a well-engineered vaccine. You can have, a positive trade-off where, yes, you have accidents once in a while, but if under certain conditions, if the vaccine is very well engineered and for very specific pathologies, you can expect an upside of going through a vaccination for a population. So it's more complicated because reproducibility becomes a bit harder because every patient is unique. But with the right set of methodologies, you can deal with that, and you can have something like a consensus and some degree of reproducibility. Now, if we look at supply chain, it's very, very difficult. Why? Because first, I mean, it's just impossible to do an experiment over 1 million supply chains. I mean, at Lokad, it took me a decade to be able to work with some degree of intensity with about, a bit more than 100 companies. And realistically speaking, I mean, maybe by the end of my career, I will be at 1,000 companies, but that will be it. And a million, never. It's completely outside, what is feasible, I believe. And companies are, I would say, way more unique than patients, just because a company is actually a large set of humans they operate in very different markets, very different conditions, very different history, very different strategies, everything. So literally, we have a big methodological problem about reproducibility. But that's not the only methodological problem that we have. Remember those conflicts of interest. My perception is that everybody has conflicts of interest. And the question is not to try to find a mythical figures that would not have any conflict of interest. I believe that typically, academia tend to present itself as, the white knight that has no conflict of interest. But I believe, I've been working for academia for a while. I started a PhD that I never completed. But I spent enough time in academia to witness the fact that people have plenty of conflict of interest of their own. Publish or perish is real. You need to select problems and perspectives that are compatible with the fact that you're going to get your papers published. And that is profoundly diverging from whatever is going to make your company profitable, because there are many ideas that are very, very good, but due to adversarial behaviors, first, you don't necessarily want to broadcast them, and then they are sometimes so simple that you can't really publish them. And simplicity is good, except if you're in academia where everything has to look so complicated so that it looks like more scientific. But no, real good science is not about having accidental complexity. It needs to be as simple as that can be, but no simpler. Now, mechanical sympathy. That's another thing that is also really worthy of interest. Mechanical sympathy is, again, supply chains don't operate in a vacuum. They operate on a substrate. And this substrate happened to be modern computing hardware and modern enterprise software. And now, what is very surprising to me, I mean, still surprising, is that literally even people who are supposed to be on the fairly I would say at the fairly technical side of the spectrum, like let's say data scientists, how little they know about modern computing software and how it works under the hood. So, and I believe that if you want to be really good at, again, quantitative supply chains, you need to have a bit what I refer to as mechanical sympathy. Just like the Formula One drivers, they are not engineers capable of, re-engineering a Formula One engine. Yet they know a lot about mechanics. They know because they need to know exactly what their engine can deliver for them. So their job is to be a Formula One driver, but what is going to make them win is the engine that they have. And they know it, and they are very familiar with all the subtle nuances that goes with the machine that they operate. And here, so that we need to have mechanical sympathy and right to the silicium level to understand a bit what computing hardware can do for us and what it can't do. And there are plenty to be said, and I believe that there is many of supply chain woes that I've seen where the problem was just a profound misunderstanding of what modern, I would say, computing hardware can do for you. And it was, for me, it was always astonishing when I was saying, a lot of people who have software engineers or data scientists in their title, and they know absolutely nothing about the computer hardware. And then we also need to have, I would say, some knowledge on the enterprise software, because it's literally our ecosystem. You don't write software that is going to operate on its own. You will interact with tons of things. You will, if you want to optimize supply chain, you will interact with ERP, with e-commerce platform, with the WMS, with the MRP, with the EDI, with the VMI system. I mean, you have the landscape is usually quite terrifying because you have so many things. And all of those things are moving at the same time. And so you need to be familiar with with basically enterprise software, its own dynamics, and how do you play in ways that are compatible. Because the problem is that it doesn't matter if you have like the perfect formulas, the perfect algorithms, the perfect Python prototype, but the thing is kind of by design a misfit. With regards to the rest of the enterprise software that happen to be running the supply chain, on the supply chain management side that I just presented. So we need to have this mechanical sympathy. Now, in terms of method, or where can you go, we could go deeper. I believe that programming paradigm are of interest. And for probably a large portion of the audience will be, what the hell is that? So my proposition for you is that one of the crux of the problem of the mainstream supply chain theory is that they approach the problem from the wrong angle. Remember when I said we have all those companies, they have ERPs that already implement the mainstream supply chain theory, but it's not working, and those people are falling back to their Excel spreadsheets. And they're right. And why is that? It's because Excel offers you what your ERP doesn't, which is programmatic expressiveness, and it happens to be of very high importance. And I believe that also a lot of enthusiasm that there is around, let's say, Python and data science nowadays is not related to deep learning, but just due to the very simple programmatic expressiveness that you can get with an actual programming language. Now the question is, as soon as you start programming anything to pilot your supply chain, what kind of programming language do you want? And can you have, superior paradigms to be better in terms of programming that will give you, better productivity, more reliability, more results, better financial performance. And I believe there is quite a few notable paradigms that you need to be aware of, because they can really be as many as a series of game changers in your efforts to really, let your supply chain practices be more accretive in particular. Now, in conclusion for this lecture, I believe that we have two IY pitfalls. By the way, I'm stealing the term intellectual yet idiots to Nassim Taleb. And by the way, I consider myself being, falling prey to this category. I don't consider myself as being immune to those problems. We have certain class of problems that only happen to educated people. It's not the sort of problems that happen to people who have no education whatsoever. It's only the sort of problems that happen only to very educated people. And I believe in my audience, just looking by the list of people who did register on YouTube, I believe I have a very, very educated audience. So we have two problems. One is naive rationalism. Naive rationalism is rampant in academic circles and among software vendors for two, I would say, completely different reasons. And by the way, I include myself in this first circle of hell. So naive rationalism in academia is rampant because if you want to publish a nice mathematical theory, you need to idealize your situation. And so you have to simplify. And you're not going to have a simple model. You are going to have a simplistic model, invariably. And so that's why the vast majorities of I would say, academic papers are just of very, very little use for businesses, is because they have real problems to face that have so many more angles than the one addressed in the paper. And you cannot just say, oh, all those side elements will be, addressed in a later paper. You need to have a better class of answers to that. It's not a satisfying answer to say, oh, I've ignored all the things that makes, supply chain very difficult, but also very interesting. So, and then for software vendors, the problem is very different. It's literally a cost issue. If you can just have a simplistic recipe, guess what? It costs less to develop. I am, as a CEO of a software company, I'm paying software engineers. They are relatively pricey. And so if I can minimize my costs by sticking to simplistic recipes, I'm all in. And obviously, this is a very strong temptation from all the software vendors, is to say, no, listen to us. This is science. This is provably something very good. You don't need more than that. Because obviously, that's a way to minimize your cost to actually deliver the product. So naive rationalism is very rampant in those two circles. And then we have another problem, which is what I class as the underwhelming recipes, or the TED Talkish perspectives, where the things where you have a lot of enthusiasm going on, a grand vision of something, and people basically talk big and do little. And here it's something that is rampant among, I would say, consulting circles, among gurus, where they provide grand theories, but that happen to be exceedingly weak when you look at the amount of depth of materials that you have, and how much you can truly put in practice from what they're proposing. So it makes you feel good, yes, but does it translate into superior supply chain results? I'm not so sure. So those are the two problems, and so we need to do things that are street smart, so no naive rationalism, but where we go into real technical depth, because it should not be all speech. We need to go to something that could actually run an actual supply chain in the real world with all the quirks that happen to be accidentally present. Okay, so thank you very much for your time today. So now I will actually proceed to the question. So let me have a look at the question. Okay, quite a few questions. So I will probably read the questions out loud so that it makes sense for the audience. So we have a question from Zuo-Jun. Setting pricing alongside demand planning is very logical in theory, but in a large company dealing with thousands of SKUs, it's much more complex. Is it realistic in a huge company, especially with cross-functional terms, which may have conflicting interests at each point of time? So that's a great question. That's a great question. And here I believe that we will address, by the way, this question in depth in later lectures. But in short, I believe that the 21st century approach of divide and conquer, where you've kind of you have completely, I would say, disaggregated large corporate structures in many divisions, it's not rational, it's not scientific, it's actually quite the opposite. And again, if I told you, about my two parents that started their careers at Procter & Gamble, 40 years ago, one thing when I was discussing with them what it was like, it was clear that marketing at the time, so I'm talking Procter & Gamble, Europe, 40 years ago, had huge powers. They could literally decide everything. They could decide that they would, in the same time, have a budget to purchase a massive amount of raw materials, that they would give orders to production to produce stuff, that they would buy, the TV ads, and they would negotiate a contract with a retail chain to have those things on the shelves. All of that in the hand of very few people that usually were like 25 years old. And if you look at modern companies, I've never seen, in my own career that is much more, recent, any company that would give the similar amount of, of power to just a few people. So I believe that there is things where companies will need to relearn of how do you need a captain, and sometimes, it's not more scientific to just split divisions across many teams. I don't think, I know that companies went very far following, I would say, a misguided perspective of division of labor. I believe it's deeply misguided. But on the other hand, we need to have recipes, if we want to do this big unification, that can be operated at scale by just a few people. And that asks the question of productivity. Because obviously, if you have recipes, practices, tools, etc., where you need an army of clerks, it doesn't work. So we need to have that. So again, we need those programming paradigm. And stay tuned, this will be addressed in later lectures. So now we have a comment from Trevor Miles. From my perspective, pricing cost is the most apparent conflict of interest. Cost and price are the domain of finance, whereas volumes and or TIF are the domain of supply chain. So yes, I agree. And here we have to kind of, I believe, reinvent s&op in ways that are more appropriate to the present state of affairs of supply chain. When I told you, when I was saying that supply chain does not operate it operates on a substrate, which is, modern enterprise software and modern computing hardware. Those things can provide, a tremendous substrate to do more, to do things that were just plain impossible to do with, I would say, a meeting-driven s&op process of old. So that's I think, a very key question. And indeed, my own take on supply chain, it's a heavy, I would say, it's a financial-driven perspective. But when I say but don't confuse me on being driven by finance. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we need to count dollars and euros. But it's true for supply chain as well as it is for marketing, as well as it is for production. It's just that we need to bring all of those, dollars of euros together, and there should be a method to that. I will get back to it. So Nicola van der Put, pricing optimization should be done together with demand forecasting and setting safety stock targets. The unification is so far ahead that I didn't start yet to dream about it. Yeah, good comment. I guess it's we will do more than be dreaming about it. It can be done. And again, I think the key message for you is it's better to be approximately correct than exactly wrong. So it's okay to be crude if crude is all you have. It's better than just being blind and just pretend that the problem doesn't exist in the first place. Now, we have a question from Pankaj Nenani. I'm sorry if I'm just pronouncing a great word. I'm just reading. I've been waiting for these lectures. Yeah, me too. How can a mid-sized organization optimize its warehouse operation using technology and software by choosing the right WMS and ERP? my message to you is WMS and ERP have nothing to do with optimization. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Because if you think that the ERP and the WMS have anything to do with optimization, then you're setting the wrong expectation. So it's going to be only pain and misery with, in terms of relationship with your software vendor. By the very design of the software, they are in the management side, that I presented before. So it's literally, and I know that many vendors are promoting, I would say, very strongly. They are featuring prominently, optimization because that's what it sells, what sells the software. But I believe it's very wrong and very misguided. And at the very core, and that's why we need to have mechanical sympathy. When I was talking about mechanical sympathy, there are plenty of things at the very core of those software that just prevent them from being even halfway decent tools for optimization. They cannot, by their very design. So it's not something that can be duct taped or improved upon. By their very design, those tools are, I would say, irremediably unsuitable for optimization. It's okay though, management is it's very important, and that's and basically supporting the workflows and everything. It's important, and those tools can provide tremendous value for that. But do not set the expectation so that you want a tool that is completely geared toward, by design, toward management to do optimization. That's wrong. It's only going to be pain. Another question: is there a big concern evaluating and selecting the right ERP and WMS vendor for those organizations which are not tech savvy? Well, I guess the answer would be, if you want to buy fine art, and there is a merchant that tells you, this painter is a painter of great renown, and obviously this painting is worth millions. Do you buy? Do you think, if you want to be good at buying, the right paintings in terms of fine arts that are really worth your money, that are going to be asset, let's say, it's a kind of an investment. No, I mean, you need to be savvy in terms of what you're buying. I mean, it's, it's just the sort of things, again, due to the conflict of interest, if you delegate that trust, you're going to be taken advantage of. I'm very sorry. I mean, again, that's just a game being played. Don't hate the players, just hate the game if you want. But literally, my message, if you want to buy tech, you need to be able to have an educated opinion on that and to go deep, to look under the hood, what is going on. And that's where you can see, and by the way, most of the good and bad properties of enterprise software are by design. So once an enterprise vendor, like Lokad, but it can be, any other vendor, has taken certain set of, has made a certain set of design choices, there are things where by design, you will be terrible. And it cannot be recovered. By design, if you're good on certain things, you will be very bad at certain other things. Again, if you look at a Formula One, by design, it's something that is designed to go super, super fast on a road that is super flat. If the road is not perfectly flat, actually, a very, cheap motorbike will go much, much faster than your Formula One if the terrain is a bit rugged. So again, design matter profoundly. What is then another question from Manorajan Dash? And by the way, he was the one asking the question first, I believe even before the lecture started. What is the function of QA/QC in supply chain? A very good question. And I believe that I have a fairly opinionated to this question, and it will come in my third lecture, which will be product-oriented delivery. Because first, QA and QC, as far as supply chain is concerned, is really about, will be really about, from my perspective, about the supply chain product that end up being delivered. And I really differentiate, again, the sort of things that I will address and not address in this operation. I do not address, things like, are my truck drivers drunk or not? Do they show up drunk at work or not? I mean, it's obviously a very, a very important concern for their own safety and the safety of others. That's a very, that's an important problem. I'm not saying that it's an easy problem, but I had to choose a certain scope for those lectures, so I'm focusing on the optionality side of the problem, not the people management side of things. And so quality control and quality assurance are very big in my agenda, but that will be from a more, I would say, productified vision of the supply chain itself, and that will make more sense in lecture number 3. Now, we have another question from Eunice. How do you succeed to plug-and-play approach where the customer supply chain maturity is weak? So I challenge the first, there is no plug-and-play. That will become more evident. Lokad certainly is not plug-and-play. It's relatively swift to deploy, but it's not plug-and-play. It takes a few months. And literally, I don't think it's even really possible to achieve, anything that would qualify as plug and play. This will become more evident in the further lectures. Again, remember, this is a wicked problem that we are tackling. So there is no there is no plug and play approach to solve wicked problems. It's just by design, it's just not possible. Now, I challenge the very assumption that when people tell me, oh, our supply chain knowledge is weak, according to what? According to which measurements? Because if you tell me that your supply chain knowledge is weak in the sense that you haven't read the 2 books I've just presented, I would say, yes, you're missing something, but you might not be missing much. So again, if your measurement is just being knowledgeable about this immense mainstream supply chain theory, I would say, yes, you're missing something, but you know what? It may not matter that much. And usually, the question is more the willingness to change yourself. And that, I believe, people, especially with internet and with things, you can learn a lot of things. By the way, at Lokad, we go from basically engineers that are fresh from engineering school to capable supply chain scientists in 6 months. So I believe you can take people that are very, that are fresh, that are willing, that are smart, and in 6 months they will be plenty capable. I mean, they will not be capable in 6 months to run, a $2 billion supply chain. No, but they will be able to really do a lot. So I challenge this idea that you have little maturity. In my own humble experience, that the perception that you have and what your actual maturity, it may not be really aligned. Trevor Miles, you have been talking about the need for countervailing KPIs and E2E end-to-end visibility for some time. Is it not an issue of maturity? Yes, but only if you have the right perspective. Again, I've met many companies that were saying that they were exceedingly mature, and you can typically recognize the companies that have this self-assessment of being very, very mature by the fact that they have hundreds of people involved with their s&op process. And they have a bazillion of KPIs. And usually they have an enormous BI team as well. Sorry, it's not maturity. It's just illusion of maturity. So again, you need, yes, we want to have end-to-end measurements. But again, the key idea is it's better to be approximately correct rather than exactly wrong. You need to have the right perspective on the problem. And usually it can be fairly forward. Some indicators are fairly straightforward and fairly simple. And even end-to-end indicators, they don't necessarily have to be absolutely, overcomplicated. A question from Barrett Lehman. Beside your own books, what recommendation do you have for the quantitative supply chain? I mean, just watch the next lectures. I will really do my best. I'm very sorry, but I would not recommend, those 2 books are, the pinnacle of the mainstream supply chain theory. So if you don't believe what I'm saying, well, you can fall back to those 2 books. They are excellently written, and I believe that you will not find, better books for the mainstream supply chain theory. Then, for an alternative perspective, just give us time to go through those supply chain. By the way, you already have over 100 Lokad TV episodes. So if you don't know what you're going to be doing the next weekend, you have that. What about I/O tools? Will they be discussed? A question from Ola Ermin. Will that be discussed in the lectures? Yes, it will be, and I will not discuss, specific tools. I mean, unless there are really specific questions asked on that. I think first we need to address, the programming paradigms for those tools. We have to think of what should be, the core design of the tools that yield the most interest for what we're about to do, because then we don't want to be distracted because there is like an endless series of open source projects that are all very cool and shiny, and we need to understand how we are going to have like high level judgment to make our assessment to even know if it's truly relevant with regard of what we want to achieve. So I believe that there is no further question. So if anybody wants to get in touch with us, don't hesitate, to send an email. You can, it's j.vermorel, my last name, @lokad.com if you want to reach me. By the way, we will have the next lecture same day, same hour next week. And then same thing, same day, same hour. So it will be on the next couple of Wednesdays, 3 p.m. time of Paris. I'm very sorry for our Australian and New Zealand friends. The time is absolutely horrible for you. I know that there is a few people from those time zones in the audience. So I wish you a good night, and see you next time. Thank you very much.